The red glow from burning planets filled the view screen as Admiral Kyung-ho Park watched his home fleet drift silently through space. His ship, the ESV Determination, felt different today. The usual quiet hum of the engines seemed louder somehow, like the ship itself knew what was coming. "Admiral, we're getting more messages," called out Lieutenant Hai-Jin Kim from her station. Her voice was tight with worry as she read the incoming signals. The Dalari Federation is begging for help. They say the Brella Horde will wipe them out completely in 2 days. Park nodded slowly. He had been reading these desperate messages for hours. Entire worlds were screaming into the void, hoping someone would hear them. The Talari were peaceful. People who had never hurt anyone. They built beautiful cities and made art that could make you cry. Now those cities were burning. What about the Altarian peacekeeping corps? Park asked, though he already knew the answer. They promised to send help, Hai-Jin replied, her fingers flying over her controls as more distress calls came in. The Talari think their rescue fleet will arrive in 48 hours. They're telling their people to hold on just a little longer. Park looked out at his fleet. 300 ships floated in the darkness, their metal hulls bearing scars from dozens of battles. These weren't the pretty, shiny vessels that other species used for exploration and trade. Human ships looked different. They were built like weapons, because that's exactly what they were. Every ship carried Marines who had grown up fighting. Every captain had earned their position through combat, not politics. Every weapon system was designed to destroy, not disable. This was humanity's way of doing things, and it made other species uncomfortable. "Sir, should we wait for the Altarians?" asked Commander Soman Lee, Park's second in command. "Standard galactic protocol says we should coordinate with the assigned peacekeeping force." Park almost smiled. Galactic protocol. The same rules that let peaceful species get slaughtered while help took its time arriving. The same civilized approach that turned wars into lengthy negotiations while innocent people died. "The Altarians are good people," Park said, his voice carrying to every person on the bridge. "They'll arrive with their clean ships and their stun weapons. They'll try to negotiate with the Brelock, offer them territory or trade agreements too. Stop the killing." He paused, watching another planet's death scream appear on his screens. "But those Talari families don't have time for negotiations. Their children won't live long enough to see a peace treaty." Lieutenant Hai-Jin Kim looked up from her station. She was young, maybe 25, but she had already seen 3 wars. Her hands didn't shake anymore when the shooting started. "Admiral, if we go in first, the other species will ask questions. They'll want to know why we didn't wait for proper authorization." Park's expression hardened. He had spent 20 years fighting humanity's enemies. He had watched good people die because help came too late. He had seen entire colonies wiped out while politicians debated the proper response. "Let them ask questions later," he said, his voice cutting through the bridge like a blade. "Signal all ships. Full combat readiness. We're going in." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as his crew began preparations. Weapon systems came online with deep thrumming sounds. Shield generators whined to life. Navigation officers plotted jump coordinates to the Talari system. Park looked at his reflection in the dark view screen. He wasn't a politician or a diplomat. He was a soldier, and soldiers had one job. They fought the monsters so other people didn't have to. "Sir, the fleet is ready," reported Commander Lee. Park nodded once. "Tell the Talari help is coming. Tell them to keep their heads down." He didn't tell them what kind of help they were getting. They would find out soon enough. Captain Woo Jin Lee stood on the command deck of his destroyer, Blood Talon, watching his sensor screens with growing excitement. The Brellock had been crushing the Talari for weeks now, and it had been almost too easy. These peaceful aliens barely fought back, making the conquest boring for his battle-hungry crew. But now something interesting was happening. His sensors were picking up ships approaching fast, and Lee's razor-sharp teeth showed in what passed for a Braylock smile. More prey was coming to die. "Captain, we're detecting a fleet moving toward us," reported his tactical officer, a Scard veteran named Grex. The alien's insect-like mandibles clicked together nervously as he read the data. "But these energy signatures are strange. They don't match anything in our database." Lee's smile faded slightly. The Brelic had conquered 17 different species over the past century. Their databases contained information on every known military technology in this part of the galaxy. Nothing should be unknown to them. "Show me the readings," Lee commanded, his voice a low growl that made his crew's spinal ridges shiver. The main screen filled with energy pattern data. The approaching ships were using fusion drives, the kind of primitive technology that most species had abandoned decades ago. Their power signatures were rough and unrefined, like something built by a race that hadn't learned proper engineering yet. "Pathetic," Lee snorted, his confidence returning. "Some backward species thinks they can challenge the Brelic horde with museum pieces." His communications officer, a young Brelic with barely grown battle scars, looked up from her station. "We're receiving identification signals. They claim to be from something called the Terran Expeditionary Force." Terran. Repeated the word like it tasted bad. Never heard of them. Probably some minor colony world trying to play hero. Down on the surface of Talari Prime, the situation looked very different. Governor Yansu Choi pressed her scaled hands against the thick glass of her command bunker. Watching smoke rise from her burning capital city, the Brelic had stopped their bombardment an hour ago. But she knew it was just a pause. They liked to let hope build up before crushing it again. Her aide, young Talari named Zelk, had been monitoring space communications all day. His large eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope as he burst through the reinforced doors of her office. "Governor Choi, there are ships approaching our system," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. "But something's not right. These aren't the Altarian vessels we were expecting." Choi felt her heart sink. The Altarian peacekeeping corps had promised to send help, and her people had been counting down the hours until rescue arrived. If these weren't the Altarians, then who were they? And more importantly, would they actually help? Or were they just another species coming to pick through the wreckage after the Braylock finished their work? "What kind of ships?" she asked, moving to the communication console where Zelk was frantically adjusting controls. "Energy patterns are primitive, Governor. Fusion-powered, heavy armor plating, and ... Zilk paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're not broadcasting any peace symbols or diplomatic codes. These ships are built for war." Above the dying planet, space itself seemed to tear open as 300 human warships dropped out of hyperspace. They didn't emerge gracefully like the sleek vessels of other species. Instead, they appeared suddenly and violently, like predators, stepping out of shadows to hunt. The human ships were dark and angular, covered in armor plating that showed damage from countless battles. Their weapons were already powered up, their shields were active, and their formation was perfect. This wasn't a rescue fleet arriving to negotiate. This was a war machine preparing to kill. Captain Lee stared at his sensors in growing confusion. The approaching fleet had organized itself into attack formations before his crew could even finish identifying them. These primitive ships were moving with the precision of experienced killers. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "I don't think these are museum pieces." Governor Choi watched the human fleet take position around her world and felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. These strangers had crossed the galaxy to reach her people, and they had come. Ready for a fight, the storm was about to break. And she had no idea what kind of lightning these humans would bring. The communication channel crackled to life across every Talari emergency frequency, filling bunkers and shelters with a voice none of them had ever heard before. It was calm, professional, and somehow more frightening than the Brelic war cries they had grown used to. "Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Kyung-ho Park of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We have received your distress call and are moving to engage hostile forces. Recommend all civilian populations seek immediate shelter." Governor Yansu Choi stared at the holographic projector as it materialized the image of the speaker. The face that appeared was human, though she didn't know that word yet. He looked younger than she had expected for a fleet commander, maybe. In his early 40s, with short, dark hair and eyes that seemed to be constantly calculating something dangerous. "Terran," she whispered to her aide Zelk, who was frantically searching their databases. "What's a Terran?" Zelk's large eyes grew even wider as he scanned through every galactic registry they had access to. Governor, there's nothing. No species called Terran in any of our records. No diplomatic files, no trade agreements, no first contact reports. It's like they don't exist. But the ships hanging in space above their dying world were very real. Governor Choi activated her communication system with hands that trembled slightly. She had been dealing with the Brelic for weeks, and their brutal honesty was something she understood. This human, though, felt different, unpredictable. "This is Governor Yansu Choi of the Talari Federation," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We appreciate your response to our distress call, but we were expecting the Altarian Peace Corps to arrive with assistance." There was a pause. On the holographic display, Admiral Park's expression changed in a way that made her stomach tighten. With worry, it wasn't quite a smile, but there was something dark and almost amused in his eyes. "Ma'am, the Altarians are still 3 days out," he said, his voice carrying an undertone that made every Talari in the bunker step back unconsciously. "We were closer." Governor Choi felt her biorhythms spike as some ancient prey instinct triggered, deep in her brain. This human spoke like a predator discussing hunting grounds. The Brelok were violent and brutal, but they were honest about their violence. This Admiral Park was something else entirely. "Admiral, we're grateful for any assistance," she managed to say. "The Brelic had been systematically destroying our colonies. Our defense forces were overwhelmed weeks ago." "Understood," Park replied. His image seemed to be looking past her, studying tactical data she couldn't see. "We've analyzed the Brelic attack patterns."
Hello!
"Standard conquest methodology? They're weakening your infrastructure before final occupation?" The casual way he discussed. Their destruction made Choi realize that this human had seen this kind of situation before. Many times. "Permission to engage hostile forces?" Park asked, but his tone suggested he was being polite rather than actually asking for permission. Before Governor Choi could formulate a response, her military advisor, Colonel Hyen Sunam, spoke up from his monitoring station. "Governor, the human fleet is already moving into attack formation. They're not waiting for our answer." On the tactical display, the 300 human ships were spreading out with frightening precision. They moved like a pack of hunters who had done this, danced countless times before. Their formation was perfect, their timing flawless, and their intent absolutely clear. Admiral Park's image flickered slightly as his ship began to move. "Governor suggests you move all civilians to hardened shelters. This engagement may get messy." "Admiral, wait," Choi called out. The human ships were powering up weapons systems that glowed with energy signatures. Her sensors couldn't identify. "Governor, I'm reading weapon signatures I've never seen before. These humans aren't using standard galactic military equipment. What are they using?" Choi asked, though she was afraid of the answer. "I don't know," Nam replied quietly. "Whatever it is, it's designed to destroy things completely." Above them, the human fleet finished its deployment and waited. Not for orders or diplomatic clearance, but simply for targets to present themselves. The Brelic had been expecting to face the civilized warfare of the galaxy's peaceful species. "We're about to learn what happened when you threatened the families of a species that had crawled up from a world of predators. The first shot came without warning. Captain Minsu Han of the human destroyer Retribution didn't bother with the usual protocol of demanding surrender or firing warning shots across enemy bows. The moment his targeting systems locked onto the nearest Brelic cruiser, he gave the order that would change everything. "All weapons, fire." Every gun on his ship spoke at once. Plasma cannons, railguns, missile pods, and energy weapons that most galactic species had banned as too destructive. The Brelic cruiser didn't just take damage, it simply disappeared. In a ball of superheated metal and expanding gas. "Target destroyed, sir," reported weapons officer Dayun Ko from her station. Her voice was calm and steady, as if she had just completed a routine training exercise instead of vaporizing a ship with 300 crew members. Moving to next target. Around them, the rest of the human fleet opened fire with the same overwhelming violence. This wasn't the careful, measured warfare that civilized species practiced. There were no attempts to disable enemy engines or target non-essential systems. The humans were shooting to kill, and they were very good at it. Captain Woojin Lee of the Brillic destroyer Blood Talon watched his sensors in growing horror as 3 more of his ships simply vanished from existence. His tactical display showed explosion after explosion as human weapons found their marks with terrifying accuracy.
Status report.
He snarled at his crew, his confidence cracking for the first time in years. His communications officer, a young Brelloc who had never seen real combat before today, turned to face him with wide, frightened eyes. "Sir, they're not trying to disable our ships. They're not demanding surrender or attempting to board us for capture." Lee felt his blood run cold. In every battle the Brelloc had ever fought, there had been rules. Unspoken agreements between military forces about how war should be conducted. Ships could be captured, crews could be ransomed, technology could be stolen and studied. War was brutal, but it followed patterns. These humans were following no patterns at all. "They're just killing us," his tactical officer whispered, watching another Brelloc vessel explode on his screens. "They're erasing our ships from space entirely." Down on the surface of Talari Prime, Governor Yansu Choi stood in her command bunker, watching the space battle unfold on her tactical displays. Each flash of light represented the death of a Brelloc ship, and she should have felt relief. Her people were being saved. The enemy that had terrorized her worlds for weeks was being destroyed. Instead, she felt a growing sense of unease that she couldn't shake. "Governor," said Commander Saul Young Park, one of the human marine officers who had beamed down to coordinate ground operations. The human woman studied the battle readouts with the calm interest of a professional soldier. "Your orbital defenses are clear. We'll have landing zones secure within the hour." Choi watched the tactical display update as more Brelloc ships died. The pattern was becoming clear. Humans weren't just winning, they were systematically exterminating every enemy vessel in the system. "Commander Park," she said carefully, "in galactic warfare, it's customary to offer surrender terms once enemy forces are clearly defeated. The Brelloc will negotiate if they see they can't win." Park looked at her with dark eyes that seemed much older than her face. "Governor, we've studied Brelloc negotiation tactics. They surrender when losing, rebuild their forces, and attack again. When they think they can win, we prefer permanent solutions." The casual way she said it made Choi's scales ripple with instinctive fear. This human spoke about genocide the way others might discuss weather patterns. "They fight like they expect no quarter and give none," Park observed quietly. Turning back to the tactical display where another cluster of Brelloc ships had just been eliminated, up in space. Captain Lee was desperately trying to organize a retreat, but the humans had anticipated that too. Every escape route was blocked by human ships that seemed to know exactly where the Brelloc would run. His fleet was being herded into killing zones with the efficiency of predators who had hunted in packs for millions of years. "Sir, should we attempt to surrender?" asked his communications officer, her voice breaking with fear. Lee looked at his sensors. Watching the methodical destruction of everything he had spent his life building, the humans weren't broadcasting demands or ultimatums. They weren't asking for anything at all. They were just killing. With the cold efficiency of a species that had learned war from a universe that showed no mercy to the weak, the sky above Talari Prime had finally gone quiet. For the first time in weeks, the deadly rain of Brelloc orbital bombardment had stopped falling on the ruined capital city. But the silence didn't bring peace, it brought something much more dangerous. Sergeant Jamin Yoon crouched behind a collapsed building, watching his breath fog in the cold air as he surveyed the battlefield ahead. His squad of 12 Marines spread out behind him, their black armor blending into the shadows of the destroyed city. Each of them carried weapons that would have horrified the galaxy's more civilized species. "Remember, the Brelloc are dug in," Deep Yoon whispered into his cum unit. "They've had weeks to prepare defensive positions. They know the city better than we do." Corporal Yoonji Lim adjusted her rifle's scope and peered through the rubble. "Sergeant, I've got movement in that government building, 200 meters north. Looks like a full squad of Brelloc soldiers." Yoon nodded. "Rules of engagement? No." "Prisoners," came the reply from their company commander over the radio. "Command wants this area cleared completely." The words hung in the air like smoke from the burning city. In galactic warfare, such orders would have been unthinkable. Civilized species used stunning weapons that knocked enemies unconscious. They had prisoner exchange programs and medical aid for wounded enemies. War had rules, protocols, mercy. Humans had different rules. Contact, 200 meters, Corporal Lim called out, her rifle already tracking the Braylock position. The weapon in her hands was a product of humanity's violent evolution, designed not to stun or disable, but to kill quickly and efficiently. The sharp crack of her rifle echoed through the ruins. There was no blue stun beam, no energy field designed to knock enemies unconscious. Just the harsh, final sound of a weapon built for one purpose. Inside the partially collapsed government building, Braylock Commander Grex felt his confidence cracking. As his soldiers reported in, these humans weren't following any military doctrine he understood. They moved through the ruins like ghosts, appeared where they shouldn't be able to reach, and fought with a savagery that defied every tactical manual. "Sir, we're taking heavy casualties," reported one of his squad leaders. "These humans, they're not trying to capture strategic positions or take prisoners. They're just killing everything that moves." Grex had commanded Braylock forces for 15 years. He had conquered 12 different species, and they had all followed the same patterns. When facing superior firepower, they negotiated. When cornered, they surrendered. When overwhelmed, they retreated to defensive positions and called for help. But these humans seemed to get more dangerous when cornered. When his troops had surrounded a group of human Marines in a shopping district, expecting them to throw down their weapons, the humans had fought even harder. They had turned the trap into a killing ground and emerged victorious. "Fall back to the secondary positions," Grex ordered, but even as he said it, he knew it was useless. The humans weren't just pushing them back, they were hunting them down. Methodically, building by building, room by room, deep underground in her reinforced command bunker. Governor Yansu Choi pressed her hands against her ears as the sound of battle raged above. The thick concrete walls couldn't completely muffle the explosions, the gunfire that had been going on for 6 straight hours. Her military aide, Colonel Mung-Hoon Kim, stood at the tactical display with an expression of growing amazement and horror. The screen showed the progress of the human Marines as they swept through the city, clearing out Braylock positions with mechanical precision. "Governor, I've been monitoring their communications," Kim said quietly. "The human casualties are incredibly low. They're advancing faster than our best estimates predicted." Choi looked at the display showing human units moving through her capital city. The blue dots representing human forces moved steadily forward, while the red dots representing Braylock resistance points disappeared one by one. "How are they doing?" She asked. The Braylock had weeks to dig in. "They know our city layout better than we do at this point." Kim adjusted the tactical display to show more detail. "It's their doctrine, Governor. Other species fight to control territory, to capture strategic points, to force political solutions. The humans aren't trying to control anything." He paused, watching another cluster of red dots vanish from the screen. "They're not just winning," he reported quietly, his voice filled with something approaching awe. "They're thorough." Above them, Sergeant Yoon's squad had reached the government building where Commander Grex was making his last stand. The Braylock had barricaded themselves in, hoping to hold out until reinforcements arrived. They had followed standard military procedure. Turning the building into a fortress, it didn't matter. The humans had brought equipment designed to remove fortresses from existence, as the sound of explosions shook the bunker walls. Governor Choi realized that her people were being saved by a species that approached war like a force of nature. Unstoppable, merciless, and absolutely thorough. She should have felt grateful. Instead, she found herself wondering what kind of universe had created soldiers like these. The fighting above had finally stopped. After 12 hours of continuous battle, Talari Prime was quiet except for the crackling of fires and the distant sound of human ships landing to deliver supplies. Governor Yansu Choi stood in her command bunker, preparing the speech of gratitude she had been practicing in her head for hours. The holographic projector hummed to life, and Admiral Kyung-Ho Park's image materialized in the center of the room. Choi straightened her formal robes and opened her mouth to begin her carefully prepared words of thanks, but the human spoke first. "Governor, we need to discuss the Brelic expansion patterns," Park said, without any greeting or ceremony. His tone was businesslike, almost clinical. "This wasn't a random attack on your system. They've been systematically working toward something much larger. Your star system was just one step in a bigger campaign." The words hit Choi like cold water. She had expected thanks, congratulations, maybe even a celebration. Instead, this human admiral was treating the battle like it was just the beginning of something worse. Security Chief Hyun Woo Song stepped forward from behind Park's image, holograms surrounded by floating data tablets that glowed with tactical information. "We've analyzed their attack vectors over the past decade," Song explained, gesturing to charts that meant nothing to the Talari leaders. "The Brelic Horde has been following a specific strategy, not the random raiding patterns your intelligence services reported." Colonel Kim, Choi's military advisor, leaned forward to study the human data. "What kind of strategy?" "They've been targeting systems with specific resources," Song continued. "Rare metals, strategic locations, populations with particular genetic traits. Your system has the largest deposits of quantum crystals in this sector." Governor Choi felt her throat pouches tighten with anxiety. The quantum crystals were what powered their cities and space stations. Without them, Talari civilization would collapse back to pre-industrial levels. "Admiral," she said carefully, "we're incredibly grateful for your assistance. Our people owe you their lives. But I have to ask." She paused, gathering courage for the question that had been bothering her since the humans arrived. "What species are you exactly?" "Our databases show no record of any race called Terrans." The holographic image of Admiral Park seemed to freeze for a moment. He exchanged a glance with his security chief, and Choi caught something in that look that made her stomach tighten with worry. "That's a complicated question," Governor Park said finally. His voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it that hadn't been there before. "Most galactic species developed civilization through cooperation, philosophy, and peaceful expansion. They learned to solve problems through negotiation and mutual benefit." He paused, and his image seemed to look directly at her. "Earth didn't have that luxury. We're from a world that tried to kill us from the day our species first stood upright. We learned warfare from predators that hunted us, natural disasters that nearly wiped us out, and most of all, from each other." Security Chief Song added quietly, "Human history is basically one long story of survival against impossible odds. We got good at violence because anything less meant extinction." Colonel Kim was studying his tactical displays with growing alarm. "Admiral, your fleet destroyed the entire Braylock force in less than half a day. How many ships do you have in total?" Park's expression didn't change, but somehow his presence seemed to fill the room even though he was just a hologram. "This expeditionary force represents approximately 1.8% of Earth's total military capability," he said matter-of-factly. The silence that followed was so complete that Choi could hear her own heartbeat. She did the math in her head and felt dizzy. 300 ships had just eliminated what the Braylock had considered an unstoppable invasion force. And that was less than 2% of humanity's military? Her aide Zelk spoke up from his communications station, his voice barely above a whisper. "How many ships does Earth actually have?" Admiral Park's hologram flickered slightly as he considered. "The question, Governor, let's just say that if Earth ever had to mobilize its full military strength, it would change the balance of power in this galaxy permanently." Governor Choi sank into her chair as the implications hit her. Her people had called for help, expecting civilized peacekeepers with stun weapons and negotiation protocols. Instead, they had summoned predators from a world where mercy was a luxury no species could afford. These humans had saved her people. That she was beginning to wonder what price that salvation might carry. What started as a Brelic retreat quickly became something much worse for the alien invaders. Captain Jinsu Choi stood on the bridge of his cruiser, inexorable, watching the tactical displays with the calm satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered his prey. Around him, the human fleet moved with deadly precision through 7 different star systems, chasing down Brelic forces that had scattered in panic. "Captain, we've got 3 more Brelic destroyers trying to reach their supply depot in the Keltron system. reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Min-Jun Lee. Should we intercept? Of course, Jinsu replied, his voice carrying the same tone he might use to discuss breakfast plans. Make sure none of them reach their destination. This was how humans fought wars. They didn't just defeat enemies, they eliminated them so completely that the threat could never return. Brelok had spent months carefully conquering system after system, building supply lines and establishing control. Now the humans were tearing it all apart in a matter of days. Communications officer Sujin Nam looked up from her station with news that might have changed everything in a more civilized war. Sir, we're receiving multiple broadcasts from Brelok. Command. They're requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations and asking for surrender terms. Captain Jinsu studied the main display where scattered red dots represented the remaining Brelok forces. They were trying desperately to regroup at their staging areas, but human ships were already there waiting for them. It was like watching insects trying to escape a carefully planned extermination. Forward that to Admiral Park, he said simply, and continue pursuit of those destroyers. Aboard his flagship, Admiral Kyun-ho Park read the surrender requests with the same expression. He might use to review a grocery list. His staff officers waited quietly as their commander considered the Brelok offers of territorial concessions, war reparations, and immediate withdrawal from all contested systems. Sir, prompted his executive officer, Commander Yanho Kim, standard. Galactic protocol would be to accept their surrender and begin negotiations. Park's expression didn't change. Negative. Continue pursuit. The simple words sent a chill through the galaxy's diplomatic channels. Civilized species always accepted surrenders. Wars ended with negotiations, treaties, and carefully worded agreements that allowed everyone to save face. This was how things were done. But humans weren't civilized in the way other species understood the term. On the recently liberated world of Talari Secundus, Marine Colonel Eugen Park coordinated with local resistance fighters who had spent weeks hiding in caves and ruins. The contrast between human efficiency and Brelok brutality was stark. Where the aliens had used fear and overwhelming force, the humans used surgical precision that left no room for enemy recovery. Colonel, the Brelok garrison here had over 3,000 troops, reported a Talari resistance leader, his voice filled with amazement. How did you clear them out so quickly? Park checked her tactical tablet with professional interest. We didn't give them time to organize a defense. Human doctrine is simple. Hit them everywhere at once, hit them hard, and don't stop until they're all gone. The efficiency was beautiful and terrifying to watch. Human forces moved like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. Every Brelok stronghold fell within hours. Every supply depot was destroyed. Every escape route was cut off. Back on Talari. Prime. Governor Yansu Choi found herself in the strange position of coordinating relief efforts while watching her saviors systematically hunt down a retreating enemy. Her communications officer, a young Talari named Kess, approached with obvious uncertainty. Governor, we're receiving more surrender requests from Brelok Command. They're offering major territorial concessions and massive war reparations. Some of the other species in the sector are saying we should accept. Governor Choi was about to respond when Admiral Park's holographic image materialized in her command center. His timing was perfect, as if he had been monitoring their conversation. Governor, respectfully, the Brelok had broken 17 previous ceasefire agreements over the past century, Park said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had studied his enemy thoroughly. They surrender when losing, rebuild their forces during the peace, and attack again when they think they can win. Choi felt her throat pouches tighten. Admiral, surely some form of negotiated settlement would be preferable to continued warfare. Expression remained neutral, but there was something in his eyes that reminded her of the predators from her world's ancient past. Governor, we've learned that the only way to ensure a predator doesn't hunt again is to make sure it can't hunt again. The implication hung in the air like smoke from the burning Brelok fleet. The humans hadn't come to restore the balance of power or negotiate a new peace. They had come to solve the Brelok problem permanently. And they were very good at solving problems. The final battle lasted 16 hours and 23 minutes. Fleet Captain Seungwon Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship, the ESV Vengeance, watching the tactical displays as the last Braylock command structure went dark. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the systematic destruction of what had once been the most feared military force in this sector of the galaxy. "Sir, enemy command and control is completely offline," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Hyung Park. "No response from any Braylock military installations? Their fleet command is gone." Lee nodded, studying the debris fields that had once been heavily fortified Braylock installations. The humans had approached this final assault like engineers solving a complex problem. Every weapons platform had been identified, targeted, and eliminated. Every escape route had been blocked. Every backup command center had been destroyed. "Status of enemy survivors?" Lee asked. "Civilian populations have been evacuated to refugee camps," his executive officer replied. "Military survivors?" "There aren't any, sir." The words hung in the air with the weight of finality. This wasn't how galactic warfare usually ended. There should have been prisoner exchanges, war crimes tribunals, reconstruction efforts. Instead, there was just silence where the Braylock military had once existed. 3 star systems away, Admiral Kung Ho Park sat in his ready room aboard the ESV Determination, reviewing final reports with Intelligence Director Min Young Kung. The data streams flowing across his holographic displays told a story that was both satisfying and troubling. "Sir, our intelligence teams have finished analyzing captured Braylock strategic plans," Kong reported, her voice carrying the tone of someone delivering news that would change everything. The attack on the Talari Federation wasn't just expansion, it was preparation. Park looked up from his reports. Preparation for what? Kong manipulated the holographic display, showing star maps with attack vectors and resource calculations. They were planning to move into Altarian space next. The quantum crystals from Talari worlds would have powered a massive fleet expansion. After that, they had targets marked in Centauri Federation territory and even some of the neutral trade worlds. The implications were staggering. The Braylock hadn't just been conquering for resources, they had been positioning themselves to challenge the galaxy's major powers. If they had succeeded in taking the Talari systems, 3 of the most advanced civilizations in known space would have faced extinction. How close were they to being ready? Park asked. 6 months, maybe less, Kong replied grimly. They already had the shipyards under construction and the recruitment programs in place. If we hadn't intervened when we did. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Both humans understood exactly how close the galaxy had come to a war that would have consumed billions of lives. Park's communication system chimed with an incoming call from Talari. Prime Governor Yansu Choi's image appeared, but she looked different from the desperate leader who had first contacted them. Her expression was strained with exhaustion and something approaching fear. "Admiral Park, we've received communications from the Galactic Council," she said, her voice tight with worry. "They're expressing concern about human military methods. Several species have filed formal complaints about the thoroughness of your operations." Park's expression didn't change. He'd expected this. Civilized species always got nervous when they saw what real warfare looked like. They preferred their conflicts neat and limited, with rules that allowed everyone to pretend war wasn't fundamentally about killing your enemies before they killed you. "Governor, we came because you asked for help," Park said simply. The Braylock Empire no longer exists as a military threat. Mission accomplished. The silence that followed stretched across space, like the void between stars. Governor Choi seemed to be struggling with words, trying to find a way to express gratitude and fear at the same time. "Admiral, the Council is asking what humanity's intentions are going forward. They want to know if Earth plans to expand its influence in this region." Park considered the question carefully. Through his view screen, he could see the debris fields where Braylock fleets had once threatened peaceful worlds. The galaxy was safer now, but safety had come at a price that made other species uncomfortable. "Tell the Council that humanity has no territorial ambitions in this region," he said finally. "We came to solve a problem, and the problem is solved. But everyone listening knew that the galaxy had changed forever. The balance of power that had existed for centuries was gone, replaced by the knowledge that somewhere in the void, humanity waited with capabilities that could reshape entire sectors of space. The Braylock threat was over. The human question was just beginning. 6 weeks had passed since the last Braylock ship had been destroyed, and Talari Prime was beginning to look like a living world again. The orbital bombardment craters were being filled in, new buildings were rising from the ruins of the old capital, and children were playing in parks that had been battlefields just over a month ago. Admiral Kyung-ho Park stood in Governor Yansu Choi's newly restored office, looking out through reinforced windows at a city that was rebuilding itself with remarkable speed. The formal meeting between them felt strange after everything they had been through together. Two leaders who had shared the most desperate moments of war were now trying to figure out how to say goodbye. Admiral, the Galactic Council has expressed formal interest in opening diplomatic relations with Earth, Governor Choi said, choosing her words with the care of someone walking through a minefield. They're particularly curious about human military doctrine and capabilities. She handed him a data tablet that felt heavier than it should have. The device contained formal letters of gratitude from 17 different species across 3 sectors of space worlds that had been marked for Braylock conquest, but were now safe because of what the humans had done here. Park's aide, Commander Young-Soo Kim, stood silently behind his admiral, watching the governor with the quiet alertness that all human military personnel seemed to possess. His presence was a reminder that even in this peaceful moment, the humans were still calculating potential threats and escape routes. Governor, we'll be maintaining monitoring stations in this sector, Park said, his voice carrying the same professional tone he had used during the worst of the fighting. The Braylock military structure is completely broken, but the galaxy has other threats that we need to watch for. Through the office windows, the human fleet hung in perfect formation against the starfield. 300 dark ships that had arrived like angels of death and were now preparing to disappear back into the void. Governor Choi found herself staring at them with a mixture of gratitude and unease that she couldn't shake. Some species are already reaching out to Earth directly, Park continued, not bothering to hide the facts. Some are seeking military alliances and protection agreements. Others are gathering intelligence on our capabilities and trying to figure out how much of a threat we represent. The honesty in his voice was both refreshing and terrifying. Other species would have couched such statements in diplomatic language, but Park spoke like a soldier reporting facts to his superior officer. Admiral, may I ask you something personal? Governor Choi said, gathering courage for the question that had been bothering her for weeks. What happens next? For humanity, I mean? Now that the galaxy knows you exist, what are your people planning to do? Park moved toward the doorway, his expression thoughtful as he considered her question. For a moment, he looked less like a fleet admiral and more like a tired soldier who had seen too many battles.